In a world where Africans have lost their roots, it has become of vital importance to document our ways. In an effort to reverse the brainwashing of the past, where we were made to believe our ways are demonic, we are pressed to create dignified and respectful platforms to unpack our spiritual ways. Moya light, Moya bright. Welcome to another episode of Moya. Thank you for all your support, guys. We see you. The channel is growing. Please remember to like, share, and subscribe if you haven't already. It's always a pleasure to give you the best content. So, in today's episode, we thought, we're always talking about the land and farming and, but it's always a faraway concept to us young Black people. So, obviously, it's an important issue because land is equal to food and food is equal to nourishment and who we are. And the ways that Africans used to do farming and our indigenous knowledge system. So I just thought it's important. Let's put the land and farming topic on the table so that we understand it a bit more. And thank you, Kakulu Sithole, for inviting us into your home and at your farm. I believe your company is called African MARMALADE.
Yes, it is.
Yes.
Thank you.
Yes.
Thank you for having me.
And goes, Mom, what does it actually do, African MARMALADE?
We are a farming business. We started off as a business that was aimed at growing food for African expats living in South Africa because they'd left their home countries and found themselves struggling to find food. And that was also kind of encouraged by my experience living in Cape Town. I originally come from Mpumalanga and I just couldn't find what I regarded as food in the Western Cape. I couldn't find pumpkin leaves, I couldn't find pounded peanuts. And so you can imagine if I was struggling coming from a different province, how difficult it was then for somebody coming from a different African country. So that is why then we started African MARMALADE. And in the process, we then expanded to producing seeds because we realized we don't have seeds. So you could still have the land and you don't have the seeds. What are you going to be planting? So, when people say, let's go back and into farming, there's lots of government programs, but it pays gomkhono, asibuyele emasimini. The question is, what are we going to do? Because then we've got the land, then we don't know what to do with it, or we can't find the right seeds, or we can't find the right mentors to guide us into our farming journeys. And all of that stuff. Some people want to farm remembering some of their grandparents, some crops were family crops, like maybe your paternal grandfather was big on a particular crop in an area. Others can struggle, but not in that household. But then when Africans got into farming, what did they do? They started farming cabbages and spinach and all of that stuff. And we're not farming what we should be farming. And we wonder why the stuff is not in our retail outlets, it's not on our table because the chefs need the ingredients to make a dish. So if he does not have the ingredients, he's going to sell you what is available from the market or a retail outlet, wherever he buys.
Maybe start us from the beginning of your farming journey because, even me, if I just come now and I'm like, I want to start farming, can you give me the information that...
Okay, so... When I started, obviously, I was a bit naive because I thought that I had a seed capital from the Tony Elumelo Entrepreneurship Program. And I thought, okay, fine, I've got $5,000. I know exactly what I want to grow. I had already identified crops that we're cutting across the different African countries. So I knew that if I grow this, I have got enough markets. So it made business sense. And then obviously, if you want to farm, you need to have the land or access to it. You either own it or have got the right of use or whatever. It could be some communal land that you are allowed to utilize. If it's not your land, there's certain stuff that you cannot grow. Because, for instance, if you're going to plant trees, now a lot of the trees, it will take about 5 years or 4 to 5 years before they can start bearing fruit. And they would have like a lifespan of between 50 to 100 years. So if it's not your land, you might have a 5 or 10 year lease. And then what then happens after that? You are leaving those trees behind. So that becomes a problem. So that is why you see a lot of African farmers are not getting into fruit and nuts, because those have got a longer lifespan, and they don't own the land that they're actually cultivating things in. So they're actually forced to grow cash crops. So that's the one thing. You need to have the access to land. Once you've got the access to land, there's an issue around about infrastructure. Is it well resourced? So for instance, does it have good water? If you're going to be growing something that requires water, and you might, even if you're going to do like dry farming, relying on the rainy season, you might plant a little bit too early when it's not raining. Therefore, you're going to need to water the plants up until you get to the proper rainy season, where maybe you're getting rain like once every week or once every second week. So you need to make sure. There's also around the issue of safety. We know that farms are in isolated areas. The roads are gravel road, they're not tarred. It's not that easy. There's limited illumination. So I'm a woman farmer, so I can't just be in any space, because not only are you exposed to things being stolen from you, but you could actually, be attacked physically and all of that other stuff, and end up having to abandon the farming space because suddenly you're scared, you traumatized. So there are all of those things. So the security issue you need to think about. Is it resourced? So if you're going to be in an area and you're not going to do the things like the no-till farming, because no-till means that you have to be prepared to first build the soil fertility. You may find that there was another farmer who was adding fertilizers and all sorts of other stuff. So you'd have to rest the soil, you'd have to plant cover crops, you have got to do things that rehabilitate the soil. Now, a lot of us don't have the money to wait to say, I've got 2 years where I'm just building the soil before I can start planting. That's not going to happen. So you need to be able to say, okay, fine, I need to plant immediately. I've got a 5-year lease, meaning that you need to produce every year. So if you need to produce every year, you need to have the money, to plant and do that and harvest, because otherwise you're paying rental every month or every year or at the end of the harvest. So when you've got nothing to harvest, that becomes a problem. But if it's family land, that's not a problem. And a lot of people are farming to augment their income. So some people are transitioning from corporate to say, what, I actually want to get out of formal employment. So I'm going to start this farming so that I can get a feel and make sure that it works and it's generating enough income so that when I now leave and the formal employment, I have got an income. Because we all know that a business takes at least 3 years as a minimum to break even. Now, a lot of us go into this thing naively thinking that, what, I'm a top performer at work, I exceed expectations, I get above this and all of that, I get performance bonuses, you get good salary increases every year because you are this star performer. That's not going to happen when you get to farming. Because you have got to deal with the climate, it gets too hot, you get too much rain, you just don't know, you are dealing with the elements, there's climate change that is actually heat the world, you've got to deal with all of that other stuff, and we don't have a register of who's planting what. So you go by the city, put them on the ground, there could be 20 other farmers that are growing exactly the same stuff. So when you now come out with this thing, with all your focus and your projections, you now find that you can't get the money that you thought you were going to get, because what has happened is that there is a surplus in the market. There is more supply than demand. When there is more supply, then it means the prices are going down. Unless, for instance, you then had an off-take agreement where somebody had committed. If you were dealing with somebody that says, what, I need this because I'm baking or I'm making snacks. So that person agreed on the price. So then whether the prices go up or down, that person takes your product at the price you agreed on. So if prices go down, the person doesn't get the benefit of the drop in price. If the prices are going up, you don't get the upswing benefit. You have got to take whatever that's there. So it's quite intense. It's not like something like, oh no, and now I've got the land, then I'm growing. You've got the land, you have got the infrastructure to actually do that. You also have got to look into the labor force. Do you have got the people with the right skill to work in your farm? In most instances, you find that you are farming, but you have got no formal training in farming. You have got no institutional or historical memory to say, oh, we were growing stuff at home. You probably You're now like the second generation that's going to be farming. Your great-grandfather was farming, and then your grandfather moved into a township or into an urban area, got totally disconnected from farming. So you have got no relationship with the land other than visiting your relatives in rural South Africa, where you kind of marvel at what your cousins and your other people, family members are doing. So you'll be like a bystander, enjoying the fresh green mealies, eating some of the the things that you get Moya. You've just been like consuming the stuff, but you don't know how it's produced. Or you see it in that room where they've put all the pumpkins, all the melons and whatever, but you don't know what it takes to produce that stuff. So that becomes something else. So now you've got to go and learn. And the problem is that if you are looking at, so say, I want to do a short course in agriculture or in farming, a lot of the courses are showing you to farm conventionally, using all the chemicals and whatever other stuff. They're not teaching you to farm the indigenous way, the way your forefathers were farming. And then if you are lucky that they teach you how to farm, like talk about agroecology or farming in harmony with nature, they're then teaching you that. Then you say, okay, now that I've got the 3-month certificate, where do I get the seeds? Because I know my great-grandmother used to grow in Ndlubu. Where do you find them? They are nowhere to be found. Because we've lost our seeds. We don't have seeds, we don't have the food diversity that we had. You're now basically stuck. You now have got to go and farm what other people, you're now going to grow the gem squash, because you're going to find the gem squash seeds. You're not going to find imbewu yamaselwa. Ayiko. You can't go big on some of these crops because the seeds are just not available. And then there's also no planting guides. So now you said, okay, fine, I want to grow this thing. So what is the spacing of this? You have got to go Google, read this document, download a 26-page document, read about all of this, discard the information you don't need, take the one that you need, and then say, okay, fine, now I've got some information, you've written some notes. Then you've got to go and do another research and another research of the 6 crops that you want to grow. And what we are trying to do at African MARMALADE is to say, the people that are coming after us, they should not pay the school fees that we had to pay, because we had to pay a premium school fees to get the kind of knowledge that we have now. We're trying to simplify that to say, you've got to make a decision. You suddenly have got 5 hectares you want to grow stuff from. What are the considerations? And we help you, take you through that, and to say, so what are you going to grow? What is it that you're growing? The type of soil you have. A lot of people, you get told, oh no, take your soil sample for testing. And this thing comes back. You can't interpret this. You don't know whether this thing is good or bad. Does it mean I've got good soil, or what can I grow from this land? What is wrong? So if I've got a low pH, my pH is sitting at 4.8, and I need to grow a crop that requires 6.5 pH, what am I supposed to do? What are the corrective measures to do the soil correction without putting the chemicals? And a lot of the stuff takes time. So if you put something, it might take about 6 months before the soil can actually get the effect of the adjustment that you've made. So you can't then go and put lime today, you put the agricultural lime this month, and you think that next week things will be fine. It's not going to work.
That's so interesting. From what you're saying, it seems like farming has got a lot of life lessons.
Yeah. It teaches you. You learn, and you can't part-time it. That's the other thing. So a lot of the farmers that have not managed to grow at the pace that you'd normally expect them to, it's because these are weekend or monthly farmers. They live in the city, they happen to have a farm somewhere in Mahalis or wherever they are, and every weekend or once every second weekend they rock up at the farm, and now they're asking the employees, what is, and they say, no, we needed this, we tried to call you, I didn't have data, I wanted to show you we have got an infestation of this and this and that. So you can't really part-time it. You've got to live on the land and really feel it, experience it. If suddenly the clouds are gathering and it rains, you're getting excited as a farmer, because that means there's water that's going to come from nature. And first thing in the morning you wake up, you're basically waiting for the crack of dawn, because you want to go outside and see what you can do and all of that other stuff. And you also suddenly see, you might have thought, I want to plant something. Suddenly the stuff that's sprouting, because some seeds fell on the ground and they've been lying dormant. Now that they're getting the rain and the weather is kind of warm, all of that stuff is coming up. So there is so much that you need to do as a person. you can't really part-time farming. It's got to be a full-time thing. It's got to be something that you're passionate for it. You also have got to have the reason for farming. Why are you farming? If you're farming and you're chasing money, so let's say you have a bad season 1. Now you're going to move into season 2. You're probably going to get off there. You also need to know, is there a crop that it relates to you? If you're chasing money, you've seen people jumping from, oh no, now that's the Fed, it's hemp. They were like, oh, there was cannabis. And then everybody went to cannabis license and everybody's like going cannabis. Then they said there's hemp. Now people are jumping into hemp. Next thing you're told, oh, there's saffron. Then you're going to be an agricultural prostitute jumping from one crop to the other because you are chasing money. If you're chasing money, then do something else that's probably going to give you the money. This is, you need to be in farming for the long haul and be able to mix and be able to say, okay, fine, if I'm doing, say, for instance, fruit, I'm going to have an orchard within the field. The fruit are going to take longer to come. It's going to take me about 4 years. But once you start harvesting, you're going to be harvesting, even your children and children's children are going to benefit from that. Some trees last for over 200 years. So you plant it for future generations, not just for yourself.
Wow.
So then you also need to be able to say, first of all, the important things that when you start farming is to be able to say, fine, yes, I'm going to farm, but I also need to be self-sufficient. So you need to be food secure. So you first have got to do it for yourself. You're growing food for yourself, and then you say, fine, I have got 2 hectares. I'm going to take so many square meters to grow food for my own family. So that you grow. And this thinking is different from the Western way of farming or the South African way of farming, where the farmers are chasing money. They're looking into export. So they're chasing export. So they're growing this thing. You're going to be exporting to the EU. You're going to be exporting to Canada, to the US, to whatever. It's feeding other people and then taking that money that you're getting in foreign currency, the dollars and the pounds or the euros, to now buy what you need. Now, the problem is that you've left the growing of your own food to other people. So you can actually starve with money in your pocket with no proper or adequate food to buy. Because how many organic farmers, how many people that are growing stuff sustainably that are out there? So why do I earn foreign currency to end up eating food that has been heavily sprayed? I was recently looking into a graph that was shocking. That was showing how much pesticides and whatever other stuff that South Africa exports to the southern African countries. So now the tomato that you're eating, you cannot just take it from the packet. That's why they say you must wash thoroughly. You can't walk into the field and take a tomato and eat it. Before you knew that you could be in the field, you could literally take a tomato, use your hands to wipe it or wipe it on your clothes and actually eat it. You can't. You could take green beans and eat that stuff. You could take anything from the field and eat it. If you want to eat some leafy greens, you could literally pick up this. Oh, this is nice. I like it. It's got a little bit of a bitter taste. Oh, it's got a bit sweetish at the end. You can't do that anymore because what's happening, people are spraying and they're basically interfering with our biodiversity and ecosystem. Because now that poison that they're spraying on their plants, it does not discriminate. So you might be having problems with the beetles, but then the beetles and everything else that's in the field is going to die. So hence, when you walk into a lot of the farms, you don't see butterflies. You don't get to see bees. You don't get to see many things. And that is why now other people are actually renting out beehives for the people that are doing fruit or nuts, because then you need the pollination. That's not going to happen. Your pollinators, you've killed your pollinators. You've killed your pollinators. They're not there. Because when you spray, that poison kills literally every living creature on that field. So now what do you do when you now have got an orchard that requires pollination? You're now going to rent the beehives that they're going to bring in just before the flowering season.
You're saying to me that because of capitalism and greed, people are trying to speed up the process and then spraying all this dangerous stuff.
Yeah. Because they don't want anything. So what happened then, the Western way of farming or the way the commercial way of farming in South Africa simply says that I am growing Hubbard squash. Anything else that's not a Hubbard squash on that field is a weed. So you're getting rid of it. So it gets sprayed with the harmful chemicals. So you're spraying to kill literally everything on the field. We were driving from KZN and we drove through the Free State. When you're looking into the fields in the Free State, all you're seeing is like maize stalk, or if they had sunflower, remnants of the sunflower that they harvested last season. You're also seeing where they'd harvested, let's say, for instance, soya beans. And there is nothing else in those fields. It's only on the edges of the field where you see some green stuff right on near the fence and on the other side of the fence. That is where there's some green stuff, because there they did not spray. So there they've sprayed everything. So there's nothing. The only thing that's growing there is the crop, the designated crop. Anything else gets it removed because it's seen as a weed. While if you're growing stuff the African way, if you were growing sorghum, you have got sorghum, you have beans, you have got pumpkins, and you've got some sunflower, and unemifino. Imifino grows randomly there. That is why in most instances, people were not planting imifino except the pumpkin ones. Because you are growing pumpkins, then having the pumpkin greens as a vegetable. But things like imbuya, umsobo, your umhlabangubo, and many you didn't plant it. That just happened to come in the field because you were using cow dung. So whatever that the cattle they ate, inkomo mazihamba zidla laphana, that stuff end up coming back into the field. So mawuthatha lo mqubo ufaka laphayana, or after harvesting, when you now bring in when the boys bring in the cattle into the field, which is deworming themselves and whatever, and eating whatever that has been left in the field. So then they zibeka ubulongo laphayana, and then what would then happen is that so they'll be sleeping there for kind of days until there's nothing now in the field. Then, so you can imagine, so you've got ubulongo that is drying up there, and then towards sometime in August, you would get the rain. There's a rain that comes in winter. We call it imbodlisa mahlangu. So it will rain, and then it helps the decomposition of whatever that was in the field together, mixing it now with the animal manure. So whether you let the goats or the cattle or whatever, or the sheep, so now you are getting all of that stuff decomposition. So now you're having, you are building your soil fertility. Come next season now, then thereafter you're gonna have the rain that's gonna come in, where you now bring in, if you're using a tractor or usebenzisa inkomo, uyabuya ke manje wenzani uphendula umhlaba ke ngoku. We are starting preparing to plant the next the stuff of the next season. We don't have those things anymore, because right now you've got, that this guy grows cabbages. He grows cabbages throughout the year. You get a cabbage in January and a cabbage in December. How's that possible? I mean, I've been seeing umbila as late as, like, say for instance in, I don't know, about June, July, and say umbila ubuyaphi ebusika. You can't have umbila ebusika. By that time umbila womile. So how are they growing this maize? What are they doing to be growing the maize? And I think we'll have a problem with our society wanting what they want when they want it. So if you want this, you want it now. You don't want to wait. You want a watermelon throughout the year. You want a pineapple throughout the year. How is that possible? It is only possible if, for instance, as a region, let's talk about Southern Africa, we look into the seasonality and say, when does Mozambique have got their pineapples and bananas? When does Eswatini have got this? Or Malawi, Zimbabwe, Botswana, Namibia? If we work as a region to say, oh, we can actually continue to have mango 2 months after it's out of season, because it will be in season in this country. It's not. Then if you're sourcing from the continent. But if now you're going to be getting stuff that's coming all the way from Spain, when was it harvested? How has it been kept fresh for you to be eating it 3 months after it had been harvested? And the rules of a lot of the stuff that we are getting I mean, your phytosanitary requirements would stipulate, for instance, that bananas must enter the country green. So they can harvest the bananas in October, and they're going to ship them for 45 days or whatever number of days it takes at sea for the bananas to get here. Now they're going to keep them at an extreme cold temperature to delay the ripening, so that at the port of entry, these bananas are green. So they meet the requirement, they tick the boxes, they get signed off, they're not having this and that, they come in. Then they're now putting them in, they still keep them at cold temperature. Now let's say they brought in 200 tons and they're only going to be selling, the customer is only able to sell 20 tons every month. So what is it? What's a customer going to do? He's going to keep this thing at low temperatures to delay the ripening, and then ripen the ones that he needs, so then the bananas get into what they call the ripening rooms, whether they're using gases to ripen the stuff. The stuff gets ripened artificially. It's not the same way as you cut a banana stalk from the field and then from the plant and you put it there and you let it ripen and naturally, and you keep on taking a little bit of this and a little bit of that. And that's why not all of them ripen at the same time. So now you've got these things that had to be, because African Marmalade gets this order, we need 50 boxes of bananas. The bananas are not ready, they're not ripe, so what are you going to do? You're going to artificially ripen them and dispatch them to the customer. So that's why our food is bad. Most of the time, either they've put in something to preserve the produce, or it's got so much chemicals that when you look at it, it rots, like it literally sips. It's slimy, it's messy. When your carrots ripen or become like maybe old, they develop this black mold. They're like dark. The problem is the problem is that people have got fridges, so they don't see how bad their food is. All you need is to go into the shop, go to different shops. Buy a packet of carrots from different shops. You can buy from 3 different stores, and go and buy baby marrows from 3 different shops, and buy whatever that you normally buy. And just say, okay, I'm going to put some of the stuff in the fridge and I'm going to put like 3 of each outside. And you look into that stuff. So that's where, what is killing us as people is what we're eating. When they say, go for it is true. So the farmers are not providing, we talk about of a pharmacy as in a farm and a pharmacy, to say that, so you are supposed to eat your medicine. But what we are doing as people, as farmers, we are poisoning the population, and people are ingesting poison. It's even worse for those that are on a raw diet. If you try to go eat healthy, you are basically taking the poison and it's in its most potency. You're taking the poison from the spinach and the poison from the carrots and the poison from the orange, whatever that you are making your smoothie with. Because this thing has not been, you might have not even cleaned the stuff that much. You just wash it, and other people say, I'm going to put some bicarbonate of soda, I'm going to put in some vinegar to try and get and soak this thing overnight. Why must we actually be washing food like that? Why are we having these toxins on our food? So when you are saying, I've got land from my parents or from my grandparents, or I'm going to lease, or I'm buying a farm, please do the right thing. Don't chase money. Money will come. Do the right thing. Feed people nutrient-dense food. Let's not poison the nation. That's just not right.
So I'm sure this brings us into the conversation about GMO then.
We're sitting, and I think this is the thing. So there's GMO, plus there's also the issue of seedless food. So the genetically modified stuff, one, from the farmer, the negative thing is that you are going to be a slave to the seed suppliers. So you buy the maize seed or the soybean seed. You can't replant that. Now, the normal thing is that if I've bought this and I've planted, and then I should be, upon harvesting, take some stuff, reserve it for my seeds, so that next season I already have got seeds. You are going to be a perpetual buyer of seeds to these seed companies, because the GMO seed is not meant to germinate beyond one season. What you're harvesting, you can't plant. And whoever controls the seed dictates the price. Because now you bought the soya beans last season. If for a ton to plant, it cost you 10,000, and they up the price to 15,000, you are either going to change the crop or actually pay the price that they're now dictating, because you don't have a choice. You don't have seeds of your own. And we know that we have got GMO cotton, maize, as well as soya. And now I think there is talk, I think there is a pending application for sorghum. So they want to actually have GMO sorghum seeds, which is quite bad as well. So now so there's a number of seeds that are GMO. The other seeds are hybrids. So in terms of the hybrids, what they did, they would work through trying to improve the yield or build some resistance to diseases or pests or something like that. So it's like they're improving on the heirloom seed. That's a check. That's what they're trying to do. So we're trying to come up with a hybrid. Now the tendency with the hybrid is that if you bought the seeds this year and you plant, you will then harvest, and normally you can replant those that you would have harvested from what you had, so you could select. But generally the hybrid seeds, they kind of perform at 50% at the next season. So what you harvested from what you had planted this year, you're probably gonna get a 50% yield than what. So the thing is that you're actually supposed to go back and buy the seeds. So they're just as bad as the GMO, but they're the lesser evil. Because you can't then say, I'm producing seeds from a hybrid seeds. No, you're not meant to be producing seeds from those hybrid. That just becomes a problem. So you're sitting with that dilemma. The issue is that people need to go and be able to save their own seeds, have what you call the heirloom seeds that have been passed from generation to generation. And each time you plant stuff, you harvest, you set aside the best for your seeds. That is why even in the olden days, people were saving seeds. Every African community has got ways of preserving seeds. Some would put it on the mud huts and use the cow dung to preserve, to make sure that there's nothing that goes in there. Others would dig trenches and put stuff in there. We saved our own seeds. Now we're not doing that because we think that seeds just come from a packet. We're also not buttering, because if I need a particular type of a pumpkin and you have it, I should be able to offer you what I have. And you might say, no, what, I need these beans. Do you have them? If I have, then we actually trade.
Exactly.
I then give you the bean seeds, you then give me the pumpkin seeds that I need. I need coffee beans, I'm going to nyotegela imbewu from the other person. We do that. That is part of Ubuntu. We're not doing that. We are just not doing that. So we are at the mercy of the seed breeders. And there is war on indigenous people and on smallholder farmers, because the laws of the countries are basically criminalizing saving of your own seeds. Yep. You go and check the seed laws of this country, what they say. You're finding yourself, you're not supposed to sell the seeds unless you are a registered seed company. So you can't say, oh, I'm selling seeds, this packet is 45 rands, because you are not a seed breeder. You're not registered, your seeds are not registered with the necessary authority.
This is just gatekeeping for the white farmers, Ms.
Yes. Because the seed companies are controlling. Remember, the seed companies are linked to the agrochemicals. So when they sell you the seed, they're also selling you the chemicals. They're selling you the program to say, pre-planting, this is what you must spray on the soil, on the soil. Then this is the seeds are already coated with some chemicals to fight pests and whatever other stuff. Basically, if whatever little creature ingests this thing, then it dies. It affects the skeletal part, so, and then you're also still going to spray. This is not enough that the seed has been treated with some chemical. You're also going to be spraying the leaves and the whatever other stuff.
Scam.
And that is why you can, from the commercial farms, you can't buy, they're not selling you the pumpkin leaves. Because the pumpkin leaves, that's where the poison sits. The pumpkin leaves have been sprayed with glyphosate or whatever other stuff. So you can't eat the leaves of those pumpkins.
There's poison in our food.
There's poison in our food.
Does that not speak to the high rates of cancer?
It speaks to the high rate of all sorts of diseases that we now have as a nation, because we are unknowingly ingesting the chemicals. And also, I think there's lack of enforcement in terms of the residue of chemicals. The people that are more protected, it's the export market. So the export market would say, okay, fine, levels of this must be this must not be more than 12%, not more than this and this and all of that stuff. So at the port of entry, when the stuff arrives, you've got plant health, the guys will take the sample, go and test for the residues of the chemicals and all that. If it's above, even by 0.something%, that gets rejected. And then the exporter now has got to take it back, pay for shipment again for this thing to come back to South Africa. And when it gets here, we see it in some instances in our markets, in our stores, it says export quality. We get excited. We think, oh, wow, we're eating the best because maybe they had a surplus. Yes, in some instances they had surplus, but in some instances, no, this was rejected at the port of entry by the importer because of the residue of the chemicals. And then we end up taking that stuff because we think, oh, it looks beautiful. I mean, you see the sweet potato, it looks amazing. Then you're going to eat that. It's got a higher amount of the pesticides, the residue in it. It's not good for you. You should not be eating. And as a consumer, you have got no way of testing the percentage or the level of toxins on your food. And that is why now we're sitting here having problems with the food, the kids being poisoned by what they're eating that they're buying from this spaza shop. And we are attacking the retailer, which are the spaza operators. But I'm saying, why are we not addressing the sources of the food? Where did this thing come from? Why are we not addressing the issue if they're saying, oh, no, this, a spaza shop is a small place. It could be the size of this room. So there is a little bit of hardware stuff here. There's household cleaning things. There's edibles. There's beverages. There's everything in there. So if this retailer, because of the easy access to things like these chemicals, this poison to kill rats, to kill whatever other stuff. So now somebody now is selling also the poison. We know if you go into all the streets of Joburg and Pretoria, any of our areas in the township, the poison being sold in small packets and small bottles to eradicate cockroaches, whatever. We've been talking about Abo Halipirim. And we thought that was for the rats. No, but now it's getting to our children because we're not protected in terms of where the food is being placed, in relation to everything else. So you've got the floor polish right there in the same, next to the poison for the rats and the cockroaches and the mosquitoes and whatever other stuff. And that is why even when in the olden days when they were selling things like paraffin, paraffin was sold in a very distinct container, and it was always need to be kept far away from the children because they could make a mistake. They could think it's a cool drink. But now when you're trying to cut costs, it's easy for somebody to take a bottle that looks like it's a bottle of juice and put in floor polish and put in a poison to spray and kill mosquitoes or kill cockroaches and kill rats and whatever other stuff. So these are agricultural poisons that it is said that it is okay to use them in farming. And that is why some of the people working in these farms would not eat the food coming from there because they know how it's made. They know how it's made. Why would I eat that? They know how it's made. So they would rather be growing their own food or they would avoid certain stuff. And there's also the protocol. There's also the greed from capitalists that says, so that if you sprayed with, like say somebody's growing kale and then they've sprayed or cabbages, the protocol says that you can't harvest for 7 days, let's say in some of these things after spraying with that poison. Now, an order comes through, somebody wants 5,000 cabbages. Will a greedy Mr. So-and-so say, I know I can't sell the cabbages to you? And most instances, they really don't care about what happens to you, whatever. So they sell. Maybe they are on day 5, the 2 more days to go. If they are unscrupulous, they're going to sell you those cabbages. That's why then you'd hear, people ended up in hospital. It's because of how bad our food has become. Not only are we messing up with the food, we're also messing up with our groundwater and the different bodies of water. Because if my farm is here and there is that wetland down there, so this poison goes down there. That's why now you don't get to see the frogs and a whole lot of other stuff. Because a lot of these animals, when you see them, it talks to your success with biodiversity. When you see a frog, you know that you've done the ultimate in restoring, your biodiversity. That's why the frog is there. It needs to stay in so when you don't see frogs in those wetlands, when you don't see, when you ask people in the urban areas, even in rural areas, when last did you see a chameleon? When last did you see a lizard? When last did you see a tortoise? And when last did you see a butterfly? What's wrong? What's happening? Why are these animals not there anymore? Why are we not able to see this thing? It's because we've decided which creatures must live and which ones must die, because we've prioritized our crops at the expense of the biodiversity that we need to have. And forgetting that some of that biodiversity is actually part of our food system. So you take, for instance, izindlwa, those things that will come out just before it rains or after it has rained. That is part of, that's another source of protein. So in certain parts of the country, you're going to have izindlwa, and there's nothing wrong with that. Nature has provided a source of protein. You don't have to go to the shop to buy that. It is there. You could just literally go out there, go pick them up from the ground, because after they've lost their wings, you pick them up. That's a source of protein. But you don't get to see that stuff. Bees would have, now we have to rely on honey that is only available from retail outlets. In the meantime, when you knew that you could literally go to the forest and come back news. And that's why you could remember eating bee honey on the honeycomb with that stuff. You don't get that stuff anymore. Getting beeswax is a mission. You have to pay a fortune just to get access to beeswax, which was something that was easy. It was always out there. We've eradicated trees, and this is the thing. A lot of the people, when they get farms, they get a piece of land. Here is the land, you can grow stuff. What do they do? The first thing they're bringing in chainsaw, TLB, and then they just move, they cut the trees, they chop, and then they leave the entire flat area now. There's no tree. There are no trees in our field. And that's not how amasimo used to be. Even abantu basemasimini, they would put izinto zabo, you would put something there. If they wanted to listen to the radio, they'll put the radio on the tree, and then they could still listen to the news or whatever that was happening while working in the field. Those commercial farms don't have trees. Now you've got to go plant trees to create windbreakers, because now the wind is just blowing throughout everywhere. So we do the same thing at our homes. We are paving. There is nothing where the groundwater can go. So that's why then we end up with all of these natural disasters, because the water just comes at full speed and it just goes all the way down there and causes a lot of damage.
You were saying earlier on, but you're now working with the government on this new bill that has been... Can you unpack it a little bit for us?
Okay, so there is the Indigenous Knowledge Systems Act that was passed in 2019, and it looks into indigenous knowledge and obviously the different qualifications. It basically explains what indigenous knowledge systems are and how it's supposed to function from what they will call amakhosi, they call it traditional leaders, but it goes beyond that. But you have got amakhosi acknowledging and recognizing that there's different kingdoms within the country here and there, from KwaZulu-Natal, Northern Cape, all of those things. How are those structures are supposed to be governed? But even the succession planning or the succession in amongst ubukhosi. So we know ukuthi ubukhosi bamaHlubi is not going to be the same as ubukhosi bamaMpondo, ubukhosi babaKhatla, and all of that other stuff. So those communities have got to sit amongst themselves and be able to explain, so that even if there are disputes, matters end up going to court, to be able to say, but Zulu, this is how the king is selected. And the problem is that, obviously with any standard, it's such as but fundelwa. You are born into it, so you can't say, so what skills should the king, show? How do you teach? You need to have grown in that place, in that environment. Then it also looks into things like hunting, to say that there is indigenous ways of hunting. We were the best hunters, of the in the continent. That is why people would move from one area to the other area, tracking the animals and knowing exactly we did not slaughter or kill more than what we needed.
Yes.
So we made it a point, and I learned last weekend why the young boys, what they had, like they would have the stuff that covers up to somewhere here by their thighs, and then they would cover just a little bit of their bum. And It had to do with conservation. So this guy was explaining, who were from Kwanongoma, Uguti, so one impala had to provide amabeshu out 10 for young boys. So 10 young boys, and these would be boys more or less below the age of 12 or so. So you could take impala eyodwa or unxibisa abantwana abayi-10. Not what you're now getting, where then one impala has got to go to one person. Because that's when then we are, we're going to depopulate the impalas. Now we're short. Now we've got to go try and get them from Namibia and whatever. And we're creating an imbalance in the system because we've either killed more than what we were supposed to, or we've killed too little, that kind of stuff. When instead of allowing nature to regulate itself, and we live in harmony with that. And so they were talking about simple things like when you are hunting, that you don't go and like now, it's they say now the females are pregnant. So if, for instance, we had laid a trap and it catches a female one, you actually have got to free it because it could be pregnant. And you don't know that it's pregnant, so you let go. So you're only going to kill the male animals in the wild and not the female ones because you want them to continue to reproduce. So it's all of that stuff. And so when we were sitting there at Emakhosi in Urundi, was to really discuss that stuff. So we were in one of the commissions that looked into hunting, to know the correct way of hunting, the way Indigenous people were doing it, whether you were hunting, you had dogs that are helping you, uvusinyamazane ngapha, and then be able to corner it onto the other side. And the fact that there's protocol, that you do speak to go to whoever, the Nkosi elapo or Induna elapo, to announce yourself, and you know that there's certain animals that you're not supposed to be actually hunting, even if whether you were using a bow and arrow, you have to quickly take out that and make sure that you're safe. If it does happen, you go and declare to whoever that's in charge of that area to say, I know we did 1, 2, 3. And then we're also looking into the indigenous ways of growing crops and where people get the skill, and the fact that you kind of learn this thing, it's passed from generation to generation. But now we obviously need to document to help other people. Somebody who says, look, I did not have the privilege of growing in this kind of a setup. How do I grow food in a sustainable way, indigenous? So that's part of that act that we're now operationalizing. We've pitched the hunting and the habitat, crop production and fishery and animal husbandry at NQF level 5. We can look into other standards to say maybe we can do a level 6, a level whatever, but we've pitched it, let's say, for instance, at a level 5, we felt that is sufficient for what we had to do. And animal husbandry as well, to say the whole raising of the goats, cattle, how they're supposed to be headed and whatever, like all of that stuff, the impact, what happens when you end up with two, if you were breeding and all of those things, the goats, the boys knowing the work, the relationship of humans with animals. The fact that you can tell that this animal is not okay, the fact that, they were explaining that inkomo would have to be back before 4, before sunset, because they get inspected from the ticks or whatever that they might have. And they were also explaining that, one guy coming from Kwanongoma, he said that he has got 200 head of 200 cattle, and he's got 400 goats. He does not need to use chemicals. He explained that the indigenous ways of doing this is before the introduction of all these things that you can now spray on your animals and whatever, and some of these things are harmful. He says no. So in a lot of these grassland, you've got these thorns, the thorny trees. He said no. So what people would happen is that people would then have these thorns, and then you actually prick that tick. You prick and you prick and you prick, and then it dies. Also what it does, because it's not going to die, it's just going to fall off. And not because now if you're going to pull it, you could actually make the animal to bleed. So they were not pulling it off because you don't know how deep it has gone into the skin of that animal. So you just prick, and you leave them those things. After a while, then, they kind of they've died, and then they fall off the skin of the animal. So they were showing us all of those things, and the fact that, even, and also when you look in terms of the onto the hunting, the fact that certain animals were reserved for, say, the royal family. So you can't suddenly have got ingwe being for somebody, because we know that we don't have enough of these things. There's not plenty of them. So certain animals would be utilized by abantu abathile, even when it comes to the birds, being able to outline the important birds in the particular community. So it was all of that, and we went to isigodlo senkosi uKhothama uDingane, where we found that, like when they make the way they will be fencing a homestead in the Zulu way, but because we've had the furniture industry being greedy over harvesting the mtomboti trees, those trees are now scarce. They were literally, you could not identify one in a close vicinity. Now, this is like in a 22,000 hectare space where you don't have these trees, which were so crucial in actually creating the surrounding, because those things last for hundreds of years. So they would be there, and you have created the surrounding of a particular area. I say the Mtomboti tree is now very scarce. It's not easily available. And then the other stuff gets attacked by umuhlwa. Now you have to now go and treat this thing for just like people are treating gum poles. But we had trees that would not be attacked by umuhlwa. But we are not looked after nature. And unfortunately, this act only came out in 2019. We are now sitting in 2024, where we are now starting to say, okay, let's look into the qualification framework, into what is the scope of work that each person must have, what is going to be the accountability to this thing, and all of those. We're creating this thing so many years after the act has been passed. And we're not even having many institutions in this country that have got qualification in terms of indigenous knowledge. I mean, the first one that went out was the University of Northwest, that has got degrees in terms of indigenous knowledge. Currently, I think they've got more than 300 undergraduate students. I think they're currently sitting with about 18 PhD students that are doing research in different areas on indigenous knowledge, and they've got some master students. And then I think they're followed by the university, I think it's the University of Venda, or University of Limpopo. Only those two provinces that are really, really seriously focusing on that. The others, they're doing it, but it's really not that serious. We had abalaphi bendabuko. We had them, and we had to unpack what is the sangoma, what skill must the sangoma have, the different levels of training. We went all of that. We talked about twasela ubungoma, isindawu, igedla, inyanga, umehluko. There was a commission that was dealing with that. And then we had on the other side to say, then you have Izanusi, we touched on into Zotatu Credo Mutu to say, but Izanusi doesn't even get trained, it's a calling. And this person can see the future, can tell us something that's going to happen 30, 40 years later, maybe things that would happen long after the person has passed on. So they spoke about all of that stuff they were covering in the Ningi J. So I think it's the best time to be alive, because so much is happening and everything is coming together. On the Department of Agricultural side, there's issue around food security that needs to be addressed, and we are not going to be left behind on the indigenous food. To say, let's talk food security, but let's also talk food sovereignty. Let's talk about what nutrients we are looking for that people must have, so that we're not saying, the plate must have spinach. We need to say the plate must have so much % of this. And if that can be found from unomdlomboyi, then it's going to be unomdlomboyi on the plate and not spinach. We can't be told it must be carrots. We're saying, so what is it that carrots have? So what nutrients are you guys looking for? So we can then get that from the African pumpkin. So we create route to market for our indigenous stuff, because otherwise they're going to remain in isolation, where they're going to be sold only by the taxi rank, by the train station, on a plate, in a bucket, by Abo Mama Labayana. They're never going to see themselves in shelves. Why are we not having our own indigenous African vegetables $8? And if they are there, they're just like put in a tiny little corner there with no information, no proper labeling, other than if it's amaranth. There's no effort to say how to cook this. I mean, people still get information on how to cook spinach, even though people have been cooking this thing. You still find recipes. And then people do a product extension to say, oh, instead of just thinking about cooking spinach, you can make a spinach, you can make a quiche, you can make a spinach muffins. We're not getting into that stage to say beyond just thinking, oh, what else can I do? So you can literally replace your rice, you can replace pasta, anything, any of those carbs you can replace with our indigenous grains, which are much more nutritious than what we are busy eating.
Which is why we're dying so young.
Yes, and we are eating, what we are doing is that we are eating 3 meals a day and taking snacks in between, and we're still supplementing. Can you imagine? So you eat breakfast, you have lunch and supper, and in between, if you've had your breakfast at like 7 or 8, around about 11, if you're working, you're going to go down to the canteen, you're going to grab some chocolates and some chips, and then in the afternoon, you're going to grab a can of cool drink and a packet of chips or a sandwich, but you ate at 1. And if you're going to knock off at 6, now suddenly you are hungry. You get home, whereas you are busy preparing your supper, you're having a packet of chips. You're dipping, you have got chips and a dip that you're now having, or you're having some dried fruit, or whatever that you might be eating. And then you're going to work, let's say you're going to only sleep at 11. So you ate at about maybe between 6 and 7. By kind of 9:30 or 10, you're feeling hungry. Or if you have got to like work till very, very late, you're going to end up with another mini meal. And on top of that, you still go to the chemist and buy supplements. And then people are drinking energy drinks as well. So what's wrong with your food? Why is it not giving you energy? Why are we having, we're seeing an explosion on prices, on sales of all of these energy drinks. People are drinking this one and that one and whatever. Spending a fortune. People are drinking like between 2 to 3 of these energy drinks a day. And it's just another poison that people are ingesting every day. What's wrong with your food? Why is your food not fueling you with energy? There's something wrong with our food. Definitely our food system is broken. And we need to go back to the drawing boards and analyze and say, what are we eating? What is food? Because Africans used to eat food twice a day. We used to eat twice a day. 3 times a day is a Western construct. We're eating twice a day. And growing your own food was paramount. Emakhaya kukho igadi. Umzi ezilalini kukho igadi, kuyatshalwa, xa uchitha amanzi from a kitchen, uchitha phana, umile intanga that you didn't plant because after washing your vegetables, umile imbotyi because uhlamba izinto, things are just growing in front of the yard. Eback akho gadi, eback kukho toilet. Kukho other stuff at the back of indlu, akho gadi. Ukutya kwethu, it's important, it's right here. And akho mzi that is not supposed to have a fruit tree or umthi apho uhlalwa khona. In the townships many, many years ago, whether you're talking about townships, Tema, Katlehong, Togoza, the Pretoria townships, Atteridgeville, Mamelodi, in Teta about Soweto, almost every home had not less than 2 fruit trees.
Yeah.
So in the Highveld, people had your pomegranates, they had a peach tree, they had apricots, they had plums and whatever. If you go down to the Lowveld, we have mango trees, we have avocados, and we have all sorts of guavas and whatever. You go to Limpopo, same thing, they've got subtropical fruit. As in Congo, what happened? Abantu have paved their yards. There are no fruit trees. So now, they're buying them from the shops. They're not growing them from their yard. And those they tasted differently than what we're getting from the shops. The apple and you never, and when we were growing our own food, we also learned certain stuff about living with others, about sharing, because you never ate a full apple. Even if they will harvest 12 apples from the tree, and then you either have your grandfather or your grandmother or whoever that was in the house cutting that apple into 4 quarters, and you get, your sister gets, your brother get, we all get. We learned about sharing. And then if there was an extra, let's say there was only 3 of you, it was not given to the favorite child. Your grandmother will cut and make sure that you get a second portion of that. So you learn to share. So that's why it becomes easy as an adult that you share your limited resources with your loved ones. But because now everything is in the shop, you know what, we're not sharing because I've got 1.5 kg of apples, you get yours, I get mine. So we learn nothing. things like growing imbumba, your cowpeas, that taught us about which when they say let us be united as imbumba, you see how those beans grow. You also see when you're harvesting them, the fact that you cause bopes being kata, that was one way, when we're packing them, and also when you cook them, the fact that they come together, it will teach you about ubuntu. There's nothing you're gonna learn about eating asparagus.
Sorry?
Sure. Yeah, sure. So there's nothing you're going to learn about asparagus. There's no Ubuntu or living with others that you're going to learn from the Western vegetables. Beetroot is just beetroot. Carrots is just carrot. There is nothing that's going to educate you about that food or how you're supposed to be a human. Because we've taken humanity out of ourselves as people. Don't have that anymore.
Our relationship with food, hey? Yeah. It's a spiritual thing.
Yeah. I mean, every
how
child.
How take care of you.
Yeah. Every child that grew up in the 80s and the 70s will tell you the stories of being chased by a dog after they've stolen some fruit from Umamu Banbani. You know when you have got some fruit hanging on the side of your yard and you take Mama said, hey, that's honey, all of those kind of stuff. And the fact that there was food in nature. When you came, if you used to walk to school, there was always some kind of food. After eating a guava, you throw this thing, a guava tree grows, and then suddenly there's guavas along the way. So there will be different types of fruit depending on the area where you are. Now what we're seeing in the urban areas, it's all these ornamental trees. They look pretty, but they can't help us. And we are faced with serious urban hunger. Where people are sitting in their townhouses, in their apartments with no food. And then you also have got the body corporates that are insisting that everything, we worry more about the aesthetic of the places where we reside. And yet people are broken on the inside because they're hungry. You are not going to go and knock at the guy next to you and say, hey, bro, can you help me? Just even something, I'm hungry. You can't. People are just like great pretenders walking around everything that's fine. And that's why then people are taking on their lives. People are depressed, And who again benefits when these things happen, these social ills happen? Big Pharma. The pharmaceutical industry is benefiting. Because you have got people that are going to end up being institutionalized, that are permanently on medication. They can't function without all of those things. Because we're disconnected from our food. The food is not our medicine. The food is not adding or helping us with anything.
Thank you, Mom Sithole. Thank you so much. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
That was so insightful and enlightening. Okay, and there you have it. Isn't it amazing how our sense of abundance is connected to actually us growing food? As we hear that food has got seed and things grow like that. So can we think about starting to grow our own food on a serious note, because it's going to affect psychologically how we feel about the state of affairs. Moya light, Moya bright. Thank you again for joining us, and we'll see you again next time.
Thank you.
Thanks, Ma.
Thank you.
Who are you when all you were has been diluted by lies and white lines cancelling out all that which has been written of your history? Why do you look at yourself as a mystery? Doesn't the sun shine because you open your eyes? Doesn't the moon stay situated within the same stars your DNA sparkles off? Your spirit knows that surely corner into e off. Buza umoya so you may return to being well off. Because spiritually you are rich, yet your ancestors cry because you are out of reach. But yours is to command all elements while God takes inspiration from the very mirror she looked at to become. Remember who you are and never finish just when they think that with you they are done.